Hi guys, welcome back to the e-Spurs podcast for part 2 of our Player of the Season special. We are now going to be looking at the players that have made a significant impact on our season.
Come on, e-Spurs! Come on, e-Spurs! Come on, e-Spurs! Come on, e-Spurs! Tottenham!
Hello guys, welcome back to the e-Spurs podcast, our Player of the Season special. Guys, we've obviously touched upon the main nominations. We're going to go through the rest of the squad that has to give a mention to. They've all been absolutely phenomenal. We're going to start with you, Jace. Hugo Lloris, a guy again this season, just one clean sheet off the Golden Glove. Again, ultra consistent, Jace. What have you made of his season?
I think Hugo's had a good season. I think there's if I was really critical, I think there's a couple of moments in those really big games. I think of the Manchester City one, for example, where he made a pig's ear of one of the goals, and I think even the goal against Liverpool, where he kind of could have done better and ended up parrying it straight down. They score from the rebound. So I think Hugo, we all know his level of consistency. We all know the fantastic agility that he's got. He pulls off saves that are just marvellous. But there's always that little fear that in the current way that we play, where we're looking to play it short and constantly use goalkeepers using their feet, I think that's the part of Hugo's game that stops him from me being what I call genuinely world class rather than being very top class. And I think that's the part of his game that obviously the club have got to work on. And it was actually strange to see Lopez in that game in Hong Kong take a goal kick straight to the opposition, and you thought, well, there you go, perhaps it's not only Hugo's distribution that's a problem. But no, his general all-round play is exceptional, and I wouldn't swap him for another goalkeeper. And I think we should also have a brief mention of Michel Vorm, because there was lots of comments in previous years about he's not good enough, but he came in for that Liverpool.
Wasn't it? What a great save! Remember that save he made, Jace? The save he made.
He made a massive save against Everton when he came on as a sub, and I think I forget who it was through, 1-on-1 just before half time to put them 2-0 up. He made a massive save, and then he was exceptional in that game against Liverpool. And if I remember rightly, one of the qualities that he showed that probably nobody thought in that Liverpool game was his sweeper keeper. He came off his line about 3 or 4 times outside the box and cleared things up. So, and every time Michel Vorm played this season, he's handled a job brilliantly, and he certainly hasn't put a foot wrong this year. So, Hugo's excellent, but we were lucky to have Michel Vorm as backup this year as well.
Yeah, it's great you make those points. And bring it on to you, John, next. Kyle Walker. Again, another guy that's had a good season. Anything particular you want to highlight about Walker's season?
I think the best moment for Kyle Walker this season was Stoke away, where I think he cleared the ball, or he passed the ball out from inside his 6-yard box and then started off on this ridiculous run. We went outside of Lamela, and he ended up, after like 90 yards of sprinting, cut the ball back for Ali to score, to put us in control of that game away at Stoke. But I think he's been consistently good until about the last 5 or 6 weeks, when I think it's no coincidence that all this talk of him moving has affected him. I think obviously the performance at West Ham wasn't great. We've covered that already, but I think at 27 he is now. He should be at the peak of his powers. I desperately hope that we keep him. I think he's a fantastic player, and I think going back 2 or 3 years, it seemed every other week I was on this podcast using the words brain fart and Kyle Walker in the same sentence, and I've not done that. No one's had the chance to do that really for ages, and I think that he's such a good player, and he's an important player as well. I know Trippier's come in and done really well, but Walker's still number one for me, and like I said, I desperately hope that he stays at Tottenham, because we'd miss him. I know we would, and it'd cost again. All of our players are so good, it'd cost us a lot of money to replace any of them. Yeah,
I want to come to you, Ian. Just as John there mentions about Walker and Trippier, just in your opinion, how do you find, Ian, the difference in terms of Walker and Trippier now? Are we looking at a big gap, or is that slowly closing? Because Trippier's performances towards, like I say, the end of the season, and when he has come in at the very start, I mean, he's definitely improved, hasn't he?
Yeah, I think he has. I think the only thing that is different, I think, that is the pace levels. I think we all know that Kyle Walker's got some blistering pace about him. However, what I see from Trippier is perhaps a better thinking footballer. Sometimes his distribution or his crossing ability is almost as laser guided as as Eriksen's. So I remember that wonderful cross he put in for Son to come in and grab his second. What was that against? Was it against Watford at home?
No, I was saying, in your opinion then, so in terms of next season, if Walker is to stay, who gets that right back spot for you in terms of the starting place? Is it Walker or Trippier in your opinion?
I think, I'm sorry if I'm raking over old ground again.
Right.
I think a lot depends on who the opposition are.
There's not a first choice in your opinion. It is all down to purely the opposition on the day of the game.
Yeah, and how you want to play the game, and how you want to set your team up. If you think that we're going to have somebody up against us that's lightning quick, then you put Walker on. If you've got someone that isn't, or you've got the opportunity to sort of like get at the defending team and whip crosses over, then you go for Trippier. And I think that this is a squad game, and I think that 20, 25 people of your squad have to be able to come in and hit the ground running when you need them to.
Yeah. And what do you reckon, Jace, just on that question, Trippier or Walker for you to start next season? Again, are you already in that it's based on the opposition, or do you have a preferred first choice?
Well, I think, as Ian says, it purely depends who you're playing. I mean, if you're up against Leroy Sané, for instance, at City, who's got pace to burn, or Sadio Mane type players, then you definitely want Walker, because he did get caught out by Martial, and he had a pretty torrid time, didn't he, in that game at Monaco in the Champions League, where it was a horrendous night for him, and I feared for him at that stage. You really thought, blimey, what on earth have we got here? And he looks a pretty average player. But I think those home games where we're dominating possession and you're playing against bottom 10 teams, and we saw your Watfords, your Bournemouths, Crystal Palaces, teams like that, where you expect to have a lot of the ball, his extra bit of delivery is particularly welcome in those games. So I think it's fantastic to see him get that England call up. It was really well deserved at the end of the season, and I've always said, if he gets more game time, I think he'll certainly push Nathaniel Klein, and you can see the battle for that England squad place going into a World Cup between Trippier and Kyle Walker, and it's a fantastic news for us to possibly have the blow of losing Walker, to immediately see Trippier get that England call up. But no, I think there's definitely times when you would badly miss Kyle Walker, and of course, even if Kyle Walker does go, it's still a lot to ask Kieran Trippier to play through 40 odd games in a season. So he may well replace Kyle Walker in some games, but we still have to go and sort another right back in the event that we do lose Kyle Walker.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, we'll be across the shows over the summer, so we'll definitely be reporting in terms of transfers. Let's hope he will be staying with the club. Guys, we're going to look at the other end of the spectrum, or say in terms of the opposite fullbacks on the left, Danny Rose and Ben Davies. Let's firstly start with Danny Rose. Let's come to you, John, because I think fair to say that Danny Rose, the way he started the season up until his injuries, again, he was a contender for player of the season. Again, just how much has he improved, John, since Pochettino's come in?
Yeah, no, you're definitely right. I think, for the first few months of the season, he was good enough to be voted into the team of the season, even though he hadn't played since, end of January or February, whenever. So, it was gutting really that he got injured when he did, and he's still out, obviously, still injured. So it's been a sort of a mixed season for Danny Rose, I think. And I say mixed because he's another one that seems to, kind of like Moussa Dembele, he seems to break down quite often. You can have all the skill in the world and be a great footballer, but if you can't play 3 games in a week, you're no good to a club like Tottenham. And I'm not saying we get rid of him. I'm definitely not saying that. But if he can just,
It's an area we need to just maybe look at, John. Is that what you mean, in terms of just trying to see if we can maybe do something with maybe treatment or whatever, just to try and manage that a bit better? Yeah,
definitely. I think, we've had plenty of them over the years, haven't we? Players that have been in and out. You go back to Darren Anderton, obviously.
Ledley as well, yeah.
And Ledley King, players like that, great players, but they're not on the pitch often enough. And I hope Danny Rose doesn't turn into one of those players. But yeah, I mean, going back to your question, he's been, definitely one of the most improved players since Pochettino come in. Allegedly sat him down and said, I'm going to make you an England player, and he has done. But I think, some of the best money we've spent in the last 3 years was bringing in Ben Davies for 10, 12 mil, whatever it was, from Swansea, because not only did it, improve Rose almost instantly, but Ben Davies is a good player as well. So you sort of got 2 top players for that money in that particular transfer, and I think Davies has come in and been exceptional. I think it just goes to show what a run of games can do for a player, because you can't honestly say that at any point over the last 10 games or whatever it was, You know, it weren't very often you'd go, we missed Rose tonight, or Davies hasn't been great. I think he come in and, we missed him badly in the Cup semi-final. I think, at full-back, I just hope that them four stay, because we're so well covered. And, in the modern game, I think the full-backs are probably one of the most important positions. They've got to be athletes, first and foremost, and all four of ours definitely are.
Yeah, we are, like I say, truly blessed in that area. And going to come round to you, Ian, with this Danny Rose, Ben Davies. We're going to touch on Davies very shortly, but Danny Rose, there's a great BBC 5 Live interview that he done on Friday night with Jermaine Genius. He went as far to say that he wished he met Pochettino when he was younger at the age of 18, because he doesn't think the players at Spurs, maybe the youth especially, don't realise how lucky they are having a guy that is so forward thinking. I mean, there has been rumours about Danny Rose, but you would get that feeling, Ian, from his comments that he seems to love playing under Pochettino.
Yeah, I think you can see that all around. His plays, his body language. Towards the end, under some of our other managers weren't great, but since Pochettino has been in charge, his whole demeanour and his joy, rediscovering the joy of playing football again has shone through. And I think that he's been phenomenal for us. And we all thought we'd miss him when he got injured, and I think we've missed his pace as well, and it's great to have somebody like Pochettino there who so obviously is such a father figure to all of them.
Yeah, and like I say, fingers crossed Danny is back. He's obviously having this operation, so fingers crossed that's all gone to plan and he's back for, like I say, I think it's touch and go real, mate, the start of the new season. We'll have to wait and see. Let's bring it along to Ben Davies. Going to come first to you, Jace. I mean, when he first came in, I think it was fair to say he didn't have everyone on his side, but again, it's hard, Jace, isn't it? The intense nature of the Premier League and the pace it's played at, it's very hard just to come in and naturally kind of adapt to that straight away. But again, with a run of games, Jace, we've seen the best of him, haven't we?
Well, as you said, he was really criticised when he came into the side, and you felt sorry for him when he was up against Sadio Mane almost in that very first game, and Son played that day, offered him absolutely no protection at all, and they just constantly ran at poor old Ben Davies, and everyone just made a knee jerk and instantly wrote him off as he's not good enough, and he's this, that and the third thing. And yet slowly but surely, I think he's a quite intelligent player. He's obviously he looks a quiet, studious boy, doesn't he? And that personality eventually came through, and he as each game went on, there was a few less people criticising him, and I think as Danny Rose's injury became obvious that he wasn't going to come back during the season, more and more people started to think, right, well, you have to get on with Ben Davies now, and started to appreciate the good things he was bringing to the side, rather than just looking at him that constantly at that start saying he's not as good as Danny Rose, he's not as good as Danny Rose. And I think, as the season went on, he was comfortable playing as a back four, and he even played well as a wing back at times. All right, not the thrust of Danny Rose, but his crossing and that was excellent during the end of the season, and he scored that fantastic goal at Hull that rounded the season off for him. So no, full credit to him for everything he's done, and I think he ended up playing 29 games in all competitions. Yeah. So and the number of mistakes that he made in that time, Sadio Mane, he didn't actually make a mistake that day. He just couldn't live with the bloke for pace. No, yeah. Well, there's not a lot you can do about that. And as I say, when he was running at him without any protection in front of him, I think that was a tough baptism. But from that moment onwards, I don't really remember him doing anything wrong. And Coites's story last week about him, I think, summed him up, that when he won the man of the match in that Villa Cup tie and scored that day, the very first thing he was worried about was one horrendous back pass that I think had gone out for a throw on that day, and that's all he was concentrating on, was his weak part of the game, and that sums him up.
Yeah, he has, like I say, been a great player this season, and fingers crossed, like I say, next season it'll go on and again improve, because that's all we want to see. And going to bring it round to you, Ian. Next player I want to discuss is Eric Dyer. We had a comment last week to say that maybe he doesn't get as much praise as he should in terms of the positional sense, what he does. I mean, he covers right back, central defensive midfield, centre back. Eric Dyer, I mean, we've seen links of him away to Man United. He's a priceless asset to Spurs, isn't he, in terms of what he can cover and the way Pochettino trusts him in terms of the various positions he does.
I'm going to give him plenty of praise, and I just think that he is such an underrated and understated player for us. He might not be blessed with the greatest of pace when it comes to when he's playing in a back three. But by God, doesn't he half settle in there, and it almost seems like he's been playing there all his life. And then next game we moved him up into midfield, and it looks like he's always been there all his life, full back. I just think he's another one of those players that, to replace someone of his obvious calibre, you'd be looking at 40, 50 million, and I just think that if we want to go into next season and then the new stadium the season after that, Eric Dyer is the sort of utility man that we can ill afford to be without. You forget sometimes what his preferred sort of position is, and I think we brought him in, didn't we, to be a replacement full-back, and then he went in, and then he sort of was at centre back, and then he changed him into a CDM, and I just think it's what a fantastic acquisition that man's been for us.
Yeah, and he's sacrificing himself on so many occasions, John, bringing it to you, where we've seen him chip in so many times this season, maybe in positions that he doesn't want to cover. But again, same question to you, John. How good is he in your opinion? And again, where do you think his best position is? Because I think this has been one of the biggest debates of the whole season.
I honestly don't think he's got a best position, Rick. I think he's quality, and I think if you are that good, you can, you're going to be able to play different positions equally as well. I don't ever worry if I see him, in central defence in a back four or a back three. I don't worry if he's in midfield. I know that you're going to get, a certain level of performance out of him. And you can't really say that he has many bad games, no matter where he plays. I think he's one of them players, especially as a young English player, where he just wants to play, and getting into 3 or 4 different positions and doing well has obviously done wonders for his international career. I don't think any of us would have thought that 2 or 3 years after signing him, he'd be, an England starter or anywhere near the England team even, really, because none of us knew how good he was or, what sort of player he would end up being. But I think it just comes back to the scouting network. We mentioned it earlier. What did he cost? 4 million.
Yeah.
And I think he'd get into most teams in the Premier League. I think that's how good he is. I think he's superb player. And the fact that you probably wouldn't put him in your first choice back four, and you probably wouldn't put him in your first choice midfield. But how many games has he missed? He's played pretty much every game.
Yeah.
That's how good the lad is, and Poch obviously trusts him, and I hope he stays at Tottenham for a very long time, because at 22, 23, he's got the world at his feet, I think.
Yeah, like you say, fingers crossed he's at Spurs for a very long time. And Jace, bringing it to you, final one on Eric Dyer. I think Pochettino was very keen to remind the press this season that, look, we made Eric Dyer the man he was. We was, as a club, we managed to kind of push him into, like I say, the positions that we wanted. Just to kind of maybe remind the player that, Spurs have been the major factor behind the development of him, as much as obviously himself. Do you think we can keep hold of him, Jace? Because obviously our club's looking around, even dare I say someone like Bayern Munich, because he's got everything, hasn't he? And it's priced as having a player that can cover this variety of positions.
Well, I certainly don't worry about him leaving this summer, despite the small bit of speculation there has been. But I think, when you think of the clubs that Mourinho's managed and the players that he's managed and the style of football that Mourinho always wants to play, the fact that he is interested in Eric Dyer, I think is the biggest endorsement of Eric Dyer. And I think he probably is better at the moment in that central midfield role. I think his passing is excellent within there, short passing, and we've seen him clip some lovely balls forward. The pass at Hull for the first or second goal there, which Trippier then pulled back. So I think defensively, if he plays as a centre back, my one worry with him, which is a minor criticism, he can let people run off behind him, and I think that's a minor thing, but that comes with experience, it comes with age, it comes with the more and more games you play there. I wouldn't be too worried about that yet from Eric Dyer, and he'll definitely go on to be a top player, and I think he's a big player for us, certainly leading into that new stadium. So no, I can't see him leaving in the summer at all.
Fair enough. And we're going to move it on, guys, to another player this season who has stood out, didn't make the nominations, but he wouldn't have been far behind, was Moussa Dembele. Ian, first to you. Again, Dembele, when we keep him fit, he's a an unbelievable player, but he's just trying to manage it, isn't it, this fitness thing, because he doesn't appear to be able to complete 90 minutes, but a great player.
Oh, we're running out of superlatives for this fella. He's almost impossible to get the ball off of. He seems to be another one, a bit like Wanyama, who glues the whole team together. And he's just like a tank, but a skillful tank, where someone, that's able to sort of like shrug a player off and knit it together and bring other players into the game. Like I said, I hope that he's gone off to have this. Didn't he have go off to have this little procedure on his foot? And
yeah, that's right.
We hope that that will clear any persistent sort of niggles that he's got with his injuries. Because he's another one that you keep him going for a whole game, and you certainly notice it, especially when you're up against it.
Yeah, and John, we've seen this season, he's run so many games for us in that midfield. Again, so pivotal to us. And I'm going to ask the same question to you. Is there any way we can try and get this guy's, fitness sorted out? He's gone for this operation, but we're in that situation where he can seem to only play between, 60, 70 minutes, and again, we lose him for that final 30.
I think it's just where the position he plays in the team is, physically very demanding. And I think, although he's only 4 or 5 years older than Wanyama, I think it's beginning to tell a little bit, because he's not been a player that's played 38 games every single league season forever, like some people do. But I think it's just the stress that his body is put under on every game. You think how many players he holds off per game. How many, his ankles and his knees must be knackered. The amount of little pirouettes he does and, knocking the ball away from players. I'm no sports scientist or nothing, or physio, but, you think that, because a lot of his running, he's not just in straight lines, and he doesn't sprint much, but he's like short, sharp turns, and I think he just puts a lot of stress on his limbs, and I think that's all it is. In my opinion, we still need one more to play in midfield, because, if you do lose Wanyama or Dembele for any length of time, you're relying on Winks to play there.
I was going to say, John, just on Winks, are we seeing a possibility? I don't want to go too far with him, because he's, again, in his breakthrough season, I like Winks, great passer of the ball. Is there a possibility that he could be lined up as the future? I don't want to say Moussa Dembele, because they're two different players, but could he be a possible alternative in that midfield for you, Winks? Or is it, again, too early to say? What do you reckon?
Oh, no, I definitely think he's ready.
Okay.
I definitely think he's ready. I think he's such a good player.
Yeah.
That he's a very clever player. A lot of the work he does in between his ears. He doesn't rely on any particular attribute. Like we were saying about Kane, he's not particularly quick. He's not a very big guy, but you don't see him getting picked off, and you don't see him losing the ball too often. I think he's a very good calming influence on the players around him. I think we just need that kind of player next to Winks that would do the physical stuff really and run with the ball. But as a quarterback, if you like, Winks is right up there in my opinion. I think he just needs a little bit more game time, and we'll see him, hopefully, blossom into a beautiful little flower.
I love that terminology, John. I love it. And bring it around to you, Jace. Winks, we've just touched upon him very briefly there, but in the small period we did see of him before he got the injury, again, he looks like a player that coming season he'll get more game time, won't he?
I certainly think he'll get more game time, and I think he's a type of player that the way he receives it and he moves the ball so quickly on. I think those teams that high press us, and we've talked this season about how we handle teams that press us. I think that's ideal for him, that the defenders can knock it straight into him and he moves it so quickly on from there, which perhaps even your Wanyamas and that can sometimes just get caught a little bit in possession, but Winks sees that pass really early and moves it on, and I think he's important in those. But I think if you're talking about us challenging for a title and staying within that top four and hopefully progressing through that Champions League group, you're asking a lot for Winks to come in and play 20, 25 games in a season like that and be able to deliver week in, week out in the way that you perhaps need someone to. So I certainly don't want to jettison Harry Winks, and I certainly hope we see a lot more of him next year. But I think that's the role that if somebody said to me, we talk about a marquee signing, it's perhaps to replace Dembele long term, that I'd sooner see the marquee signing, because when I look at You know, you talk about marquee signings at the other end of the pitch where you've got Ali, Son, Ericsson, Kane. I think there's less room for a marquee player there than there is naturally a marquee player in that Dembele role.
Yeah, and one player, just to say, who has performed, we've seen pretty much week in, week out, coming around to you, Ian, is Dele Alli. Can't leave this guy out. He's been, again, phenomenal. And again, that question was asked at the start of the season, Ian. Can he do it for a second season? And not only has it done it for a second season, it's even better, his performances. Just again, this guy is improving game upon game, season upon season now. We're going to be approaching his third season. Just how much better can he get, Ian?
I think he's got the potential to become another global superstar.
Would you say, Ian, probably when you look at our squad at the moment, Dele Alli, I know we've obviously got Kane. Kane for me looks like he's Mr. Tottenham Hotspur. Don't want to put the knockers on it, but Dele Alli, there's just something about him. And again, I'll put him in the same kind of category as when we had Gareth Bale here. For me, he looks like he's destined for big things, and I would love to keep hold of him. Ian, do you think it's realistic to say that, or do you think because of the nature of the kind of player he is, the swagger he has, the goals he gets in the big games, is that a concern we may lose this guy, or are you still fairly confident that as long as we're matching his ambition, we can keep hold of him?
I'd like to think if we're matching his ambition, we'll be able to keep him, and I think that, you know, he'll enjoy playing at Wembley next season. You know, as long as he's grown up a bit, you know, from his previous sort of Europa incident, and then moving into a new, you know, 62,000 seater stadium that hopefully we'll all fill every week. He'll be in a top team playing in a top stadium in a top league, you know, and I think that, you know, that has to be his ambition. You know, there might be something in him that thinks, do you know what, at some stage I need to go and play at Barcelona or a Real Madrid, and, you know, and if that's his ambition, then, you know, I for one wouldn't want to stand in his way. You know, I just hope that we can provide him with all the ambition he needs and meet that ambition by him, you know, continuing to wear the number 20 shirt for us.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And John, same question to you.
I think Ian's already said, really. I think, you know, he will be the next global superstar to be spawned from this current Tottenham team, and I think that what was nice about him was he put an Instagram post up after the whole game saying how much he's already looking forward to next season, and
that's great, isn't it? To commit his future, it sounds like that early.
Yeah, it does. I mean, if there was any potential transfer to be had for him this summer, I think his agent would have been saying you can't be saying stuff like that on your social media. So let's hope that, you know, that's, you know, he'll be there in the new ground and he'll still be a Tottenham player for a while yet. But I think it's inevitable, really, that there'll be interest from European super clubs. But I just think that the annoying thing for me so far, you know, really over the last few months, is the fact that all the pundits keep saying, oh, Spurs will have to do this to keep their players, Spurs will have to win trophies, blah, blah, blah. How many more better clubs are there for players to join at the minute than Tottenham?
Yeah.
No one's talking about how much of a great proposition we'd be for any potential new signing. And it all seems to be one-sided, and Dele Alli seems to be at the forefront of a lot of the talk. I know we've had the stuff with Kyle Walker and that, but it frustrates me that you know, we've had teams before. If you take the cup-winning team from 2008, that was decimated the following summer because we won a trophy, not sort of out of context, if you know what I mean. We weren't good enough to be, you know, we finished 11th that season. We weren't one of the best teams in the league. Yeah. So you have a bit of success, and then naturally bigger teams come and cherry pick your best players. But it ain't like that at the minute. Like the brilliant graphic that Jay put on Twitter earlier about, you know, comparing that season to this season that's just been. So from 2008 to 2017, it's ridiculous. You know, I would much rather be where we are now, and I think that. It frustrates me that all the pundits, all the Sky lot especially, who I can't stand, they're going on about, this Tottenham player will have to move here to do this and all that. But really and truly, if you're a player looking to move within the Premier League or come to the Premier League, you know, what better club is there really to join than Tottenham at the moment?
Yeah, and we're saying this, John. We finished second. It's not like we finished fifth or sixth. And I think the thing in the past that was always thrown at us is that, you know, players will not want to come to Spurs because there's no Champions League football. Now there is Champions League football. we're not winning the title, so they may look to go to a club that are going to win trophies. But we're not far away, John, are we? We've had this discussion so many times. We're literally now we're battling for the title every season. You know, we got to the semi-finals of the FA Cup. So I mean, there is no argument that Spurs we're in there, aren't we? Competing. That's all you can ask for.
We definitely are. I think all we need this summer, which we didn't get last summer, we need a Champions League transfer window. Yeah. And what I mean by that is we can't have any more Nkudus and Sissokos. We can't. No. It's got to be the time now where I know we've got the stadium coming up and stuff, but to be earning enough money to be able to buy players when we get there, we need to be doing well in the Champions League and doing well in the Premier League. And you know, you've got to speculate to accumulate. You know what I mean? We've been so lucky that Dele and Eriksen have stayed fit pretty much all season, because we might have finished in a different league position if they hadn't, in my opinion. You know, considering Lamela was out for so long as well, and Winks has been out for ages, and all the other players you've listed off who've been injured. I think this is the time now where, you know, Danny Rose nailed it, didn't he, in that interview you said earlier? He was sat behind the bench at the FA Cup semi-final, looked at Chelsea's bench and just went, oh my God, we're banging trouble when them lot come on. And no one looks at our bench really. And, you know, there's good enough players on our bench, but they're not, you know, they're not Hazard, Fabregas and Costa like it was for Chelsea that day. You know, I think we just need a Champions League standard transfer window, and then we'll be well set to do it, you know, for a third year and a fourth year, hopefully. But yeah, Dele's not going anywhere. Don't worry about that.
There you go. John's calming reassurance there tells us Dele will be a Tottenham player for many years to come. Jay's going to bring it around to you. Time's pressing against us. So, again, another guy that has been phenomenal this season, and some actually claim he was a backup. Part of it was Heung-min Son. Just how good has he been, Jace? And again, what would it cost us to replace him in the goals he brings?
Well, I think the biggest compliment I can pay him is that time when people said if Spurs lose Harry Kane this season a collapse, he stood up in the majority of those games. Those 2 goals at Borough, man of the match in that game against Manchester City, and his season continued like that. And he struggled a little bit once he got left out the side, but once he got a rhythm of games under him, the biggest compliment I can pay him, you know, he gets called a backup player, he gets called he'll be an impact player off the bench, and yet it's what 18 goals of his 21 have been when he started games, and I think that shows it. And you know, as well as the injuries that we've had to the likes of Danny Rose, which forced the change in formation back from the back 3, and we went to a flat back 4. Part of that was also because he was just impossible to leave out, and I think when he infamously played at wing back, I think Pochettino was just stuck that day thinking, I cannot leave this man out of the team. And he perhaps tried to shoehorn him in, but I think that says a lot for him, that you just couldn't find a way where you could justify leaving him out, and he'd really earned his place. And the goals he scored this year is outstanding, and it's been a fantastic season for a player that, as we said, wasn't the first choice for anyone. And I kept saying through the season, when people talk about we need game changers, well, there's a hell of a lot of game changers that haven't had anywhere near as good a season as Heung-min Son, and he was our backup player. To be honest with you, Ian, Jason has pretty much summed it up all there, but the combination we've had this season, the likes of Dele, Son and Eriksen, the 60 plus goals, never before seen at Spurs. Again, trying to put into context how big that contribution has been, it's been immense, hasn't it? And again, we're going to have to somehow next season try and improve on that if we're to win the league, Ian. And you're thinking, God, it's going to be a tough thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and I like the way you say if we want to win the league. You know, we were all disappointed, and that showed you how far we come. You know, like this time last year in slipping down to third, and now we've come second. And you know, and then I listened to. I was coming back in the car from Leicester, and I listened to a well-known TalkSport presenter that once plied his trade at Stamford Bridge and latterly at White Hart Lane, saying that this is as good as it gets. And I must admit, I was almost tempted to ring him up and say, wind his neck in, because I don't think it is as good as it gets. I think that, you know, we are an emerging force in our league and in Europe as well. And I think that a lot of teams and supporters are quite jealous of that, given what it's been built on, and that appears to be, you know, a solid foundation of our finances and of what we're achieving, and I think that the players that we've managed to mould and under Pochettino has been nothing short of the real fairy tale in the footballing world, because it just goes to show what can be achieved if you have a team and a club that's well run, and you get your right man in the helm to determine how you're going to play and what you're going to play. And I think that we are, we're all very fortunate to be living through this age.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I think you've summed it up there perfectly, and we've got to appreciate the squad we've got here. We really, really have. Guys, finally, before we go, I just want to give out, before we go, one quick word. Lamela, haven't mentioned him yet. Obviously, he had that injury mid-season, which again led to an operation. Very, very quickly, guys. John, coming to you. Eric Lamela, anything you want to say on him at all for his contribution of the season?
What worries me, Rick, is the fact that he took 3 years really to get going. 2 years. He started off the season pretty well, scored the first goal of the season at Everton, and now, just due to form of other players, really, in the formation change that we've seen recently, I struggle to see where he's going to fit in. I personally wouldn't let him go. I would get him tied down to a longer contract, but I really wouldn't be surprised if he does leave and he has played his last game. I was a bit upset that he wasn't at the finale at White Hart Lane as well. I think every player who could have been there was there apart from him. But then we don't really know how far what his progress is like of his rehab and stuff. But I would keep him. There's definitely a player there. He's still young enough, and I'm hoping that he's still a Tottenham player come August.
Fair enough. And coming to you, Jace, what do you want? Do you want him to be a Tottenham player come August? Would you not be too downhearted if he went?
I think he will be, because he's been out injured so long. I think you'll struggle to get a serious buyer for him, or certainly somebody that will pay the money that we want, and whether he'll be in a position to be able to even pass their medicals. And I think the next year is his last year on his contract anyway, isn't it? I think. So, there's no club's going to come along and pay the money that Tottenham will want for a player that will start the season cropped and will be possibly a free transfer. So I think that's the issue that they'll have to resolve over the summer. And it may well be that Pochettino will look and think, with the formation that we've got, and with Eriksen, Ali, Son, that's made that big contribution, and if we do go and buy another attacking midfield player, it's really hard to see a role for Eric Lamela. And sadly, with Eric Lamela, we all know that on his best day, there's always that one moment in a game that is exceptional from him. But does it happen consistently enough for us for that he can force his way back into that side? And if you pick the top 12, 13, 14 players at the moment, Eric Lamela's not in that 14. So I think it is a case, if you did get an offer, you probably will take the money. But as I say, I think our problem will be getting a serious offer for him. And
finally to you, Ian, what do you think? Would you like to see Lamela stay?
I would like to see him stay, as long as Pochettino felt that he had something to offer. There might well be, some movements, in the summer where we strengthen in a part of the game that Pochettino's identified that we need to strengthen in, and I fear that we might have seen the last of Eric Lamela, and which would be a shame. I think that his standout moments have been really stand out. The fourth goal against City a couple of seasons ago, and the Manchester United goal, the third goal against Manchester United, and the first goal of the season this season. So, I just think that on his day, he's a fantastic little player, but I'm struggling to think where he slots in now.
Shame. It's a real shame. And like I say, we've seen an upward progression for me in the 3 seasons he's been at Spurs. I mean, I'd love to keep him. I guess time will only tell. Guys, before we go, I'm going to give you the breakdown as to the result of the e-Spurs player of the season. So, in 4th place, we have Jan Vertonghen with 20% of the vote. In 3rd place, we have Victor Wanyama, 22% of the vote. Christian Eriksen in 2nd place on 26%. And finally, Harry Kane, 32%. Finally, chaps, last round of questions. Are we satisfied with that result? Firstly to you, John.
If you got, considering the amount of votes it got, I think it's fair enough. It's not just like us four. There's 4 people voting on it. It was a fair amount. So the fact that Harry Kane finished the season in the way he did probably give him a few more votes. But yeah, you can't argue with him. The boy wonder. He's done it again.
Going to you, Jace.
The thing I noticed really from that is that Harry Kane wins it with actually only 32. Did you say 32%?
32%. Yeah. Let's have a 1,500 votes.
32%, and Jan Vertonghen's last with 20%. And I think, in a four-way poll, usually the winner ends up at 55-60%, and the bloke fourth ends up with 4 or 5%. So I think that tells you just how many options that we did have. And when, as we said as well, when you look at the 4 nominations, you could have replaced any of those 4 with 4 other players. You could have replaced Dembele, you could have brought Toby into it, you could have brought Dele Alli into it. So I think that tells you just how good a season the whole players had.
I agree, I completely agree with you. And finally to you, Ian, happy with that result?
Yeah, I think that Jason's sort of encapsulated everything that how close the vote was. That's probably indicative of how well the 4 nominees plus the other sort of 6 or 7 players that didn't make the shortlist have played themselves. And I said to win it with 32% is a great result. In the scheme of things for Harry, but it's great to see that you could have thrown a small handkerchief over the others to sort of narrow the gap.
Yeah, and I've got to say, guys, thank you all so much for getting involved in the vote. Again, phenomenal, monumental season he's had, 3rd season in a row. Again, the guy is getting better and better. Hopefully, many, many more seasons to follow in a Spurs shirt with, like I say, the gold gluts he's been on. Incredible. John, thank you so much for tonight.
Oh, you're welcome, mate. Thanks for having me. It's been a good season, and nice to end it back as part of the e-Spurs podcast team.
Oh, great to have you back, John. Jace, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
You're very welcome, mate. Good to be on, and everybody have a good summer, and hopefully we'll talk a few times during the course of the summer.
We most certainly will. And Ian, thank you so much again for joining us this evening.
Oh, you've been welcome. It's been great, A, to make it, B, to not be on a train going to work somewhere or doing other bits and pieces. It's nice just to be sat at home, talking with the 3 of you again.
Indeed, and likewise, Ian, echo your sentiments. Guys, we are going to be back, like I say, throughout the course of the summer. We most certainly will be doing a season review. We've got transfer specials coming up. We've got a show on Pochettino, so a lot to go over the summer. All that needs to be said now is, come on you Spurs!
No one can stop them. We're gonna do